Ladies and gentlemen, dear EuroISME community, I greet you from Hamburg, from CEBIS, the Center for Ethical Education in the Armed Forces, an institution of the Catholic Military Bishop for the German Armed Forces. I hope that you had just as exciting and interesting discussions also in the virtual space as in previous years. I talk about the current debate on nuclear deterrence between Catholic peace ethics and security policy. For the second time in a row, the US-American non-profit organization and editor of the scientific journal Bulletin of Atomic Scientists has set its symbolic Doomsday Clock to 100 seconds before midnight in January 2021. This signifies that humanity is closer to a global catastrophe than at any time since the clock was introduced in 1947. In 1953, it was set at 2 minutes to midnight after the Soviet Union began testing hydrogen bombs. The farthest the clock has been from the doomsday hour was 17 minutes. In 1991, at the end of the Cold War. The most dangerous situation that mankind has ever faced is now, metaphorically just seconds away. The jury members pointed out that the modernization and expansion of nuclear arsenals in multiple countries, combined with a lack of diplomatic efforts to reduce nuclear risks, have increased the likelihood of catastrophe. Development of hypersonic glide vehicles and weapons delivery systems that can use conventional or nuclear warheads raise the probability of miscalculation during a crisis. In their opinion, the potential for the world to stumble into a nuclear war, an ever-present danger over the last 75 years, increased in 2020. The long-suppressed reality of nuclear weapons has returned, and with it the debates from the nuclear Cold War era about ethical dilemmas of nuclear weapons. The world is on the verge of a new nuclear reality and rearmament. New nuclear powers are entering the international arena. The advocates of nuclear armament insist on the stabilizing effect of nuclear deterrence. Critics point out that the danger of even unintentional nuclear war is constantly growing. The opponents of nuclear weapons claim that supporters of deterrence are irresponsible because the nuclear powers are not fulfilling their disarmament obligations and because they are not succeeding in limiting the number of nuclear powers. The latter respond with accusations of naivety. In an increasingly instable security environment and growing tensions between powers, deterrence would rather ensure stability, peace, and prevent conventional wars. Ladies and gentlemen, in my contribution, I'd like to present the current Church's position on the basis of the previous peace ethical argumentation, but also name the arguments from the area of security policy. My first point: the Catholic Church's peace ethics position on nuclear deterrence. The dilemma arises from the fact that weapons whose use never can be ethically legitimate are nevertheless supposed to play a role in securing peace. The dilemma has long featured prominently in peace ethics discussions in the Catholic Church. For example, the papal encyclical Pacem in Terris, issued by Pope John XXIII in 1963, was a peace ethics reflection on the atomic threat of the Cuban Missile Crisis the year before. He demanded that the sign of the times had to be recognized. For him, it was a commandment equally of justice, reason, and human dignity that the arms race should stop. Effective agreements on disarmament should be reached and nuclear weapons should be banned. From then on, official teachings on nuclear deterrence have been shaped by the idea of an interlude granted us from above, so that we might find political alternatives. A clear condemnation of nuclear weapons was not possible. Fears and objections over ending the system of deterrence were too great, even among the Council Fathers of the Second Vatican in 1965. A conditional toleration of nuclear deterrence under a kind of emergency ethics was an idea clearly expressed in pastoral letters by the American National Conference of Catholic Bishops and the German Bishops' Conference, both in 1983. Against the background of fierce controversy over nuclear armaments. Around the time of the NATO double-track decision, the Catholic Church position on the possession of nuclear weapons and the strategy of deterrence was a subject of intense debate. A security and defense policy based on a balance of fear assumed that highly spending on armaments and an increase in the nuclear threat potential could effectively prevent the outbreak of war. Positions based on interim ethics generally presuppose that it is possible to separate the deterrent threat from the use of nuclear weapons. A nuclear deterrent threat with the sole aim of preventing war was regarded as acceptable under strict conditions, but the actual use of atomic weapons was forbidden because it was incompatible with the principles of distinctions and proportionality. Like his predecessors, Pope Francis has also criticized the mentality of fear created by owning nuclear weapons. Directed against the arms race, his criticism emphasizes that this is not an unrealistic idealism. Even though the Pope's concern about the catastrophic consequences of atomic weapons is still in the line with earlier doctrinal proclamations, he nevertheless introduces a new aspect to the Church's peace ethics. Not only the use of nuclear weapons, but also the threat of their use, as well as their possession itself, must be firmly condemned. With these words, the Pope departs from the idea of the interlude granted us from above. He repeated this warning during his visit to Nagasaki in November 2019. A world without nuclear weapons was not only possible, but also necessary, the Pope said, in an appeal to political leaders. Peace and international stability were incompatible with attempts to build upon the threat of total annihilation, he added. The Pope has set down a clear line. But how can we approach the papal opinion when it comes to the dictates to realpolitik? My second point, ICAN, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and Security Policy Positions. Besides the papal positions, there are numerous movements opposed to the new attitude that regards the use of nuclear weapons as a possibility. In 2017, the Nobel Peace Prize was presented to the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, ICAN. In the same year, 122 of the 193 United Nations member countries voted for a complete ban on nuclear weapons. This followed previous bans on chemical weapons, biological weapons, or anti-personnel landmines. For its proponents, the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, it is a political commitment to achieve a global zero and nuclear weapon-free world. They believe it will help to stigmatize nuclear weapons and serve as a catalyst for their elimination. Any use of nuclear weapons, they argue, would be contrary to the principles of international humanitarian law and international treaties on human rights. When the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons was passed, the United States, United Kingdom and France and others once again expressed their firm opposition. In their view, it ignored the realities of the international security architecture. Some NATO states, like Germany, found themselves in a dilemma. If the federal government were to support the ban treaty, they would have to forego nuclear participation and press for the withdrawal of NATO nuclear weapons from Germany. From a security policy perspective, three arguments are put forward for the rejection of the UN Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. It is not feasible to eliminate nuclear weapons. It would be necessary to ensure that nobody was able to retain even one nuclear warhead. This would exceed the capabilities of international inspection and the verification regime. Most nuclear powers are not thinking of total disarmament. They do not want to relinquish their own nuclear weapons because they want to keep an ultima ratio for self-defense. Knowledge of nuclear fission and nuclear fusion is in the world, and the knowledge of how to build an atomic bomb cannot be erased from scientists' minds. And my last point, the core questions. Several times since 1945, mistakes, malfunctions have almost led to nuclear war. Disaster was averted only at the very last moment. Today, the procedures and processes that would lead to nuclear weapons being used remain highly risky. In the United States, it is a president alone who decides. If early warning systems detect approaching nuclear missiles, he has only a few minutes to respond. This is another reason why the following questions are both topical and urgent. Is there any way that the old concept of nuclear deterrence can still work in view of current security policy challenges, and what could take its place? What could override the paradoxical logic that says it is necessary to have the capability to use nuclear weapons in order to prevent their use? Can the concept of nuclear deterrence still claim credibility in the face of the new nuclear reality? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention. I wish you continued interesting discussions in the virtual space and look forward to seeing you again next year. The clock is ticking.